I thought the most helpful thing to do would be to talk a bit about received pronunciation and the ways in which it's changing, if it's changing. I'll put that up again. So I want to ask the question, whatever happened to RP? Some people will tell you that it's moribund, disappeared, no longer relevant. Well, I don't agree with those claims, but I would certainly agree that it has changed. And in order to discuss these issues, we need to define our terms. We need to ask ourselves, what is received pronunciation? And I'm going to offer you 3 different ways of defining what it is. I think it has changed, and I'm going to suggest 15 ways in which it's changed or is changing, and in particular discuss at least 10 words, 10 individual words, where we need to recognize a change. First of all then, ways of defining RP. There are several ways in which we can approach this question of circumscribing the accent we're concerned with. One I call the sociolinguistic, the second I call the ideal, and the third I call the EFL approach. So the first of these, the sociolinguistic approach, would be to do a survey, to make observations of the actual usage of speakers of English in England or in Britain. We are, after all, talking about British English clearly, rather than about American English or other varieties. And we ask ourselves, what do people actually do, the people who are towards the upper end of the social scale? We clearly, in England, for better or for worse, have got a stratification of social classes. And traditionally received pronunciation has been always associated with the upper end of this stratification. Now, just how far down we go is one of these unresolved issues. Do we look just at the upper class, or at the upper and upper middle classes? Can we define educated classes or something? Or we just have some kind of an arbitrary cutoff? But anyhow, we look at objective behaviour by people we can observe. That's the sociolinguistic approach. A quite different approach is to ask what is correct, what is the right way of doing things. We can use other expressions like, say, what is the beautiful way to pronounce English? What is a widely accepted way of pronouncing English? This is often formulated in communicative terms. What kind of pronunciation is readily understood everywhere? It's not very often that people actually carry out objective tests as to what can easily be understood and what cannot be so easily understood. But people are there all striving after the same kind of notion of some ideal pronunciation that is what's accepted. I was slightly shocked at a presentation given by a young lady working on the new edition of Daniel Jones's English Pronouncing Dictionary, where she said she wanted to get away from old class-based notions of received pronunciation and instead wanted to talk in terms of wide acceptability. Well, yes, but I'm afraid that scientifically it's something that it's very difficult to test, and it's much easier to observe social-based usage. A third kind of criterion, though, is neither of the above, but to ask what is a convenient model for teaching foreign learners. Because after all, foreign learners need to have something that is codified, that is standardized, that is formulated, and which is therefore recorded in textbooks, shown in dictionaries, shown in classroom textbooks, and so on. And what we need is something that doesn't correspond to reality in the sense that is what native speakers do, but is a distillation of reality, selecting and extracting a convenient standard that can be helpfully taught. Daniel Jones's great merit, my illustrious predecessor in the chair of phonetics in this university college, his great merit was that he did codify received pronunciation. The problem is that Daniel Jones was born over 100 years ago, and what he codified was clearly essentially his own usage. Now, 100 years ago, he was aged 15, so by that time his usage was pretty fixed, and that means that Daniel Jones's codification is already a century out of date. Now, I am not in my teens anymore, nor indeed am I in my 20s. And yet people such as yourselves, or people you teach, are. So we've got another gap here. Because ideally, somebody who is now aged 15 ought to be learning the kind of pronunciation used by native speakers who are aged 15. And that's not going to happen, but we must do the best we can to keep up to date. And at the very least, I shouldn't teach you anything more archaic than what I do myself, and preferably it ought to be a bit more advanced than what I do myself, a bit newer, to take account of the fact that I'm getting on in years. But these three different ways of defining it do lead to different results in some cases. And I've got these three examples I set out on the handout showing how this is so. Smoothing, I talked about this a bit the other day. This is the process whereby fire can be reduced to fire, silence becomes sounds, power becomes power, Howard becomes hard, throwing becomes throwing. And, well, objectively, it's part of what the upper class do. Many speakers do. It seems to be less widespread the further down the social scale you go. And what is very interesting is that it's not regarded as correct in the sense that it's not regarded as necessary. No teacher would correct a child who said fire. Oh, no, you mustn't say fire, you must say far. That's inconceivable. Fire is universally regarded as an acceptable pronunciation, even though in practice many people often say far. So we had a different answer here, depending on whether we ask about sociolinguistic criterion or the ideal criterion. From the point of view of English as a foreign language, what do we say? I think from the productive point of view, fire is fine. But there is a little worry from the receptive point of view. I think learners should be acquainted with the pronunciation far, otherwise they won't understand it when they hear it. And they will hear it, if they're in contact with native speakers in Britain at any rate. And an example of the kind of misunderstanding that can arise if you don't know about smoothing, there was a fancy dress party, a party where everybody wears special costumes, and one group of friends agreed that they'd all go as pirates. But one of them was a Swede, the others were native speakers. And the Swede didn't know about smoothing, and he thought they were going to go as parrots. So they all turned up with pirate costume, as if they were going to rob sailors on the sea, but the Swede went dressed as a bird, which meant he didn't fit in with them. There is a difference then between smooth parrot and the bird parrot. So it's useful to know about smoothing, just to avoid that kind of misunderstanding. Second example, linking R and intrusive R. Are they part of received pronunciation? Linking R certainly is, because as you know we say better, but we say better off, that R that comes in before a following vowel. Better off. What about intrusive R though? We speak of a comma, and in practice, most English people, under all normal circumstances, use intrusive R before a following vowel. They'd say you must put a comma in here. Put a comma in. Sociolinguistically, yes, this is part of ordinary received pronunciation. Idealistically, no. people sometimes get worried about this. They feel that they must be doing something wrong, pronouncing a letter that isn't there. And if you draw it to their attention, if you ask them about it, they may well condemn it. And the kind of people who are speech conscious, worried about pronunciation standards, typically condemn intrusive art. So a clear clash here between objective reality and views about what ought to be. From the EFL point of view, again, we have a dilemma. There's no need to do it. Perfectly acceptable to say put a comma in, but you ought to know about it, otherwise you may be misled. Well, when somebody says the rotor isn't ready, you think it may be on a rotor on a helicopter, but it might equally well be a rotor, list of duties, that kind of a rotor, which is equally subject to getting an R-link after it. Other examples, fear, we say fear of doing something, so with idea, we say the idea of doing something. Third example, words spelt with WH. How do we pronounce them? Do we say why or do we say why? Well, historically this word had wha, which is why it's spelt with WH. By the way, a phonetic point here, although we can phonemicize it as HW and conveniently write it that way, it's often actually articulated as a single voiceless W, some friction, probably at least labial friction, why. So do we want why or why? Do we want when or when? Do we want which or which? Do we want somewhere or somewhere? Do we want wine or wine for the verb, and does it therefore sound different or the same when compared with wine that you drink? Well, sociolinguistic criterion, what do people actually do? People actually pronounce W. In England. The Scots do something different, the Irish do something different, some of the Americans do something different. There are a few speech-conscious English people who have trained themselves to say wha, but they're very much the exception. Most people, all the time, and probably all the people a lot of the time, say why. Ideally, though, we may not feel that that's the correct pronunciation because the speech-conscious may make this effort to pronounce wha. And say why. You can often tell people who have done this, as it were, artificially, because they may overdo it. We had a television newsreader who talked about a fire that burnt down a warehouse. But of course it was a warehouse. But because she had made an effort to change ordinary where to where, she changed this where as well to where, which is quite inappropriate. EFL, Daniel Jones made the very sensible decision, in my view, to standardise just on the plain W. And that's what has been in textbooks that are based on British English ever since. He was attacked for it in his day. He was regarded as betraying the standards of proper, good pronunciation. The poet Robert Bridges had a great dispute with Daniel Jones about pronunciation standards. He regarded Jones as being a real villain and destroying beautiful speech. Incredible nowadays to read this, but that's what they all said. Okay, well, given this, we nevertheless got to come to grips with the time dimension. Because unless Jones's codification of RP is something set in stone forever and ever, we've got to recognise that languages change, English changes, and therefore English pronunciation changes. So let's look at some of the changes that have taken place in the century since Daniel Jones was a boy. I divided them into three groups, what I call the early 20th century, which are essentially things that took place before I was born, the mid-20th century, which is those that my contemporaries may go either way with, and the late 20th century, which is those that have happened during my conscious lifetime. So first of all, the early 20th century, it might not seem worth mentioning these, except that there are many dictionaries and even textbooks around that still reflect older usage. First of all, there's a group of words where you have an open back vowel followed by a voiceless fricative, where the RP norm used to be with or, but it's now with on. So cloth has changed to cloth, cough has changed to cough, cross has changed to cross, lost has changed to lost. It seems in Daniel Jones's day both pronunciations were around, but the majority used or. I suppose it's still just about true that both pronunciations are around, but there's no question at all, virtually everybody now uses or. One or two words you hear or in off, and one or two people of my age or older, but not really younger people. Generally speaking, most of the users of or have by now died out. The next point, the merger of or and or. There used to be this centering diphthong or, which was distinct from the monophthong or. So you had minimal pairs, such as to stand on the floor, or to floor in your argument. Or the difference between the number 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and what are you looking at me like that? 4. Strong form of 4. For me, though, they're homophones, floor. For nearly everybody who speaks RP or anything similar to RP nowadays, they are homophones. They sound identical. Or has disappeared from the system. I've never had or in my system. Gimson recognized this in his textbook first published in the early 1960s, where, unlike Daniel Jones, he just excluded it as one of the items in the English vowel inventory. Even Daniel Jones, in his classical works on English phonetics, he has vowel number 7, which is or, then he has vowel number 20, which is or. He goes all through or, lots of examples, practicing it, and then there's a giveaway, a throwaway footnote or final sentence which says, many speakers use number 7 instead. So it was already true for him that or was on its way out. It's certainly gone now. I was therefore disappointed to see a big new dictionary of English published in Scandinavia 2 or 3 years ago that still gave door for door and so on. It's become absolutely fixed in Japanese classrooms, door. Well, it reflects an old pronunciation. Nobody says door. In England nowadays we say door. Or at any rate, we don't make a difference between or and or. Next point. In fact, if you look on the handout, there's an extra little point here, number 3. Words with ur, like poor and tour and sure, they get transferred. I've got them, in fact, put in a different category on what I'm going to put on the screen, but there we have it, the loss of or, because I think on reflection I would have done better to include them among recent changes, and I made the overheads subsequent to making the handout. So my better view is that this is better put among the mid-20th century changes, the loss of or. What used to be poor is increasingly poor. What used to be tour is increasingly tour. What used to be sure is increasingly sure. Notice in particular the possessive pronoun your and the contracted form of you are your, both of them now very generally your rather than the older your. So we've been gradually getting rid of this diphthong. Okay, let's go back to these. Fronting of O. Daniel Jones pronounced this diphthong something like oh no. I don't know. Over the road. It's got rounded lips throughout. Oh. That's now archaic, because nowadays we say, oh no, I don't know. Lips are spread. Oh. Gimson changed the notation. A lot of people attacked him for that, but anyhow he did, and so we've now standardized on this notation that involves the letter schwa and then the ub letter to show this changed quality. Goes over the road. There did seem, for a time, the likelihood that this fronting would continue towards air. No. I don't know. Over the road. But this seems to have been an unsuccessful innovation. There is a sort of upper class, getting fairly old group now. One thinks of the Queen, the royal family of that generation, who do this. The Queen sits on a thread. Certainly not a throne, and not usually a throne, but a thread. But the younger generation from the same class background seems to have rejected that and standardized on, perhaps with very little movement, throne over the road. Now, along with this, there was the loss of the allophone O. When you had O and it got weakened, it tended to weaken to a still rounded vowel. So, to obey, weakened to obey. November weakened to November. Phonetics weakened to phonetics. But now that we've got O as the strong vowel, it weakens to an ordinary schwa. So obey weakens to obey. November weakens to November. Phonetics weakens to phonetics. And this old allophone, O, has disappeared from use. People often comment on the change in the quality of the vowel an. When we see talking films, newsreels from the 1930s and the 1940s even, we're struck by the quality of an. People say, oh, look at that man, that bad man, We think this is very funny now because we say that bad man, much opener quality, almost like cardinal 4. We now have this opener quality, that bad man. That's the fashionable way of saying it. Another thing that we laugh at in films from 50 years ago is tapped R. Very sorry. We don't say very sorry nowadays, we say very sorry. Very sorry for asking becomes very sorry for asking, an ordinary approximant R. Okay, those are some of the things then that I think essentially went before I was born. Now the ones among my contemporaries. We discussed the change from or to or. It really is the case. If you ask me what I say, I may say I say sure, and it may be the case that I often say sure, but sometimes I will catch myself saying sure. So clearly I have both of these in my competence. And I really can't tell you what leads me to use one or the other on any given occasion. There's a general drift from weak E before a consonant to schwa, from E to A, so that the older pronunciation possible is increasingly replaced by possible. It means that learners, native-speaking learners, are having problems with the spelling. They can't know whether to write I-B-L-E or A-B-L-E by just consulting their own pronunciation, as an earlier generation could, because both of them are pronounced the same as able. Bearable, possible, same able. Visible. We discussed visibility earlier, visibility becoming visibility. Carelessness, my father said carelessness. I say carelessness. I think we're both typical of our generations in doing that. Both pronunciations are around. Still, millions of people say carelessness, but the balance of preference, it seems to me, is changing. So that more millions now say carelessness, which used to be something of a minority pronunciation. In Jones's EPD, still in the latest edition, I think they've given a preference for these nis endings, but when I came to do the longer pronunciation dictionary, I made the decision to give preference to lus and nus, and I think I was correct to do so. Though people have attacked me for that. Closing epenthesis. This is something I don't do, but my students overwhelmingly do. When you have a nasal followed by a voiceless fricative, people tend to intrude a voiceless plosive. So where I say fence, fence, people instead say fence, 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 sitting on the fence. For my instance, people say instance, instance. Where I say conscience, people say conscience, conscience. And you can see how it's a nasal, usually an N, sometimes an M, Humphrey from Humphrey, followed by a fricative, usually an S, sometimes a sh, sometimes a S. It means that the distinction that I make between mince and mince, people no longer make, or likewise between prince, son of the king, and prince, plural of print. And you certainly nowadays can't rely upon that distinction. Most people don't make it anymore. Yod coalescence. This is something that's been around in English for many, many years. When you have t followed by y, or d followed by y, they tend to coalesce, come together to make ch or j. Think of words like nature. Came into English from Latin, from French. It was probably nature, French. U was a sound we didn't have, so we changed it to U. Nature, nature, weakens nature. But t becomes ch, nature. But that's probably 500, 800 years old. That ch in nature. There are other words where this same process is much more recent. Daniel Jones appears to have only had actual. At least in his earliest editions, he doesn't countenance the possibility of a ch in a word like actual. Nowadays, virtually everybody ordinarily says ch, either actual or actual, or some sh derived from an actual. But actual would now sound very artificial and old-fashioned. In words like perpetual or gradual, someone of my age has a choice. I can do that in a careful style, but most of the time I'd say perpetual, gradual, with the coalesced form. We shall see in a minute how this process is extending further in other environments. This is before a weak vowel, I repeat. T-glottling, the rise of the glottal stop. This is one of the most dramatic developments in English in the present century. In my own speech you will hear plenty of glottal stops for T, but you probably won't hear them. That is, they're in positions where they're not very salient. But I would normally say football. Foot. That's a glottal articulation, football. I don't make it with my tongue tip. Football, football. I can, if I want to be especially careful, say football. But that's a bit artificial. I can say football where I'm doing tongue tip and glottal stop, and you probably can't hear the difference between football and football. I don't think anybody can much. But more and more people just make it glottal when it's followed by a good, strong consonant afterwards. Before a nasal or a lateral. I have a stylistic, I think, alternation between a careful witness, or witness, and a casual witness with a glottal stop, witness. On the whole, I say atlas with lateral release, atlas, atlas, but many of my generation do already say atlas, atlas with a glottal stop. I have a choice, a stylistic choice between network, careful, and network, ordinary. Network. And across a word boundary, that's quite right, quite right. I have a more careful version, that's quite right. I took part in a radio phone-in a little while ago. People telephoned to the studio with their questions. This was about English pronunciation, what else? Somebody rang in, a lady of fairly advanced years, complaining about the way people nowadays do keep saying network. Why don't they say network? Which is what it ought to be. There were several of us in the panel. I must say I immediately understood what she meant, and she was talking about this. But what interested me was the other members of the panel didn't understand her point. We all say network, just as you do. No, it should be network. But that's what we say, network. In other words, they weren't aware of the difference between an alveolar and a glottal articulation. And it was only this speech-conscious lady of an older generation who didn't do it, who was very worried about it, because it's an innovation. Most people, this is below the level of conscious awareness. T-glottaling before a consonant. Well, we move on from there to the more recent changes that I'm calling late 20th century. We've already discussed this matter of the final E, happy, getting tenser, could be identified with E rather than with E, coffee, valley, and before a vowel, happier, various, radiate. So we needn't say much more about that, except to say that it's becoming general. Another interesting thing is connected with O. Now we saw that older O became O, but before dark L, for many people, you still get a rounded variety. Rather open, sort of old, told, cold rather than cold, gold rather than go, whole rather than whole. And this seems to be becoming, shall we say, more acceptable. It might once have been regarded as a Cockney or other local vulgarism, but perhaps no longer. Various other vowel quality changes, unrounding of ooh. When I say spoon, I can see that I'm archaic compared with many of my students who don't say spoon, but spoon. Unrounding the lips, spoon, spoon, often rather front. You hear people saying, hi ye, hi ye. It seems to be a front vowel almost. And they're not saying ye, they're not using the archaic form of you, they're saying you, meaning you. And this vowel is not only unrounding, it's becoming front. Good. It used to be a back vowel. Have a good look. But you hear people saying, have a good look. A good look. Good look. Good look. Yes. So something's happening to the back-rounded vowels. More glottal stops. Not just before a consonant, but in other positions. At the end of a sentence, right. End of utterance. Take it out. Princess Di. You know Princess Di, don't you? We have her on a television video saying, right, let's start. Start. This is the same sound that Japanese people use in Japanese when they say, hi. The glottal stop at the end. Now in Japanese it's just a way of signalling short vowel, plus enthusiasm or something. But in English it stands for T. Right. And there's a difference between rye, which is this grain, and right. Glottal stop means T, right. People are even starting to use it in received pronunciation before a vowel in the next word. I can't do this at all. I can't say quite easy. I say quite easy. I might just voice it and say quite easy. But no, what I hear people like me but younger saying is quite easy, quite easy, quite easy, quite easy. Glottal stop there in that position. Where I say not only but also, they say not only but also, not only but also. Would you like to try doing that? Not only but also, not only but also. Yes. Well, remember what I said about teaching people up-to-date English? We have to seriously ask ourselves whether the time has come that we must teach glottal stops, not just receptively, but also productively. Certainly receptively. You must be able to respond to a glottal stop and know it means tea. Right, another important change happening, L vocalization. This is where milk becomes milk. Dark L goes to all, shelf becomes shelf, field becomes field, table becomes table, middle becomes middle. You could speak perfectly acceptable RP nowadays without ever using a dark L if you do this. I have a colleague who does so. The odd coalescence, we were looking at it in positions before a weak vowel. But yes, before a strong vowel, even before a stressed vowel. So where my generation says Tuesday and sings tunes, it now seems to be becoming acceptable to say Tuesday and to sing a tune, where it's just the same as choosing what you're going to do. Likewise, reduce for me becomes reduce, like orange juice. So what used to be a vulgarism again and condemned as wrong is gaining much greater acceptance and seems likely to become standard if it isn't already. Now, there's one further thing that isn't on the handout, but people have been commenting on a good deal in the press, and that's what's sometimes known as uptalk. This is an intonation change. This is the use of a high-rise tone on a statement. And it sounds like this. Hi, my name's John. I come from London. I'm at University College. I'd like to talk about phonetics. That's not really the way that I normally speak. I would normally say, hello, my name's John. I come from London. I'm at University College. I'm going to talk about phonetics. So for my generation, this is done with falling, proclaiming, declarative tones. The way it sounds, of course, is as though the person is a bit uncertain, as if they're giving you the opportunity to contradict them, which is ludicrous if you think of the words being used. We associate it particularly with Americans, with Californians. Hi, I'm Kathy. I'm your waitress tonight. We do have a special. Maybe it's come from California to Britain, but it's also been very much commented upon in Australian English. I'm Barbie. Anyhow, it's sweeping world English, one way or another, and it's a very interesting development. Now, I promised you a few words, individual words that have changed. We haven't got an awful lot of time for them, but let's just have a look at the ones that we've got here. I've got some graphs or graphs here, showing the results of the survey that I carried out in connection with the London Pronunciation Dictionary, a survey of people's preferences when asked to choose between different possible pronunciations of words that we know are pronounced in different ways. The people who answered the questionnaire were a largely self-selected group of people interested in speech, but also captive groups like student classes of mine and so on. What I've done is correlate these answers with different age groups. So we've got here the year of birth before 1923, from 1923 to 1947, from 1947 to 1962, or since 1962. So the further we are over this side to the right, the younger the people are, the further to the left, the older. And there, the green line represents the question, do you prefer nephew or nevy? And you can see there the percentage of people who prefer nephew with a voiceless fricative. You can see that for the oldest group, it was equally divided between those who prefer nephew and those who prefer nephew. For the next older group, which includes me, it's already 3/4 in favour of nephew. I have to say that I'm in the minority here. I belong to the 1/4 who says nephew. And it's because I became aware that many people say something different from me that I wanted to have some kind of a basis when I was writing this dictionary, so as not to go just on my own personal preferences and prejudices, but to try and discover the facts. And on the basis of this, of course, I recommend the pronunciation nephew, even though it's not the one I use myself. And the younger groups, pretty solid in favour of nephew. The dotted line there represents a similar swing from the older suit to a newer suit. And you can see how younger people are ever more in favour of suit. So, again, I think this means the time has come when you no longer teach people to say suit, but you teach them suit. And you no longer teach them, certainly, revolution and absolute, but revolution and absolute. Daniel Jones seems to have known only deity. He never makes mention of deity at all. I know that I say deity, and as you can see from the top line on that graph, so do most people. And the younger they are, the more likely they are to prefer deity over deity. Nobody knows why this sound change has happened. It affects one or two other words like spontaneity, homogeneity. Nucleic for nucleic is another one. Nucleic acid in chemistry. The blue line is one that isn't on the handout. That's ate, taking over from et as the past tense of eat. And the red line is patriotic, acquiring some currency alongside patriotic. Okay, the next one we've got on the handout is zebra, zebra. There's the green line, and you can see that the younger you are, the more likely you are to prefer zebra. And everybody in all age groups shows a preference for zebra, which is interesting because Americans all say zebra, so this is becoming more and more firmly a British-American difference. The reddish line there is poor, taking over from poor, which we discussed a moment ago. Only among the oldest age group was there a majority in favour of poor. This was formulated in terms of does it sound the same or different when compared with to pour something out of a teapot. The lower line there is inherent as against inherent, not quite such a dramatic change, but a pretty clear trend all the same. So people tend to say stereo and inherent rather than the older stereo and inherent. Stress. Green line, applicable or applicable. I tend to say applicable, but I'm clearly out of line. Most people prefer applicable. The dotted blue line is controversy, giving way to controversy. And the red line is formidable, giving way to formidable. More stress words. The green line is kilometre, which I certainly say, which is logical, giving way to the new American kilometre. There we are. It's a very clear trend, no doubt about it at all. And the younger you are, the more likely you are to prefer kilometre. The dotted line is primarily, giving way to the new primarily, or perhaps primarily for some people. But anyhow, stressed on the second syllable, primarily, becoming primarily. And the red line is one which tends to upset older people. Harass, giving way to harass. Final stress. Okay, the last one I haven't got a picture for, but it's on the handout because people often ask me about it, and that's whether you ought to say a T often or not, ought it to be often, and you can see that at least in my survey, nearly 3/4 of people thought it ought to be with no T, but often was a better pronunciation. This is also relevant to the thing we started out with, the transfer of the cloth set from or to o, because this is one of the words in question. And you see that in my sample, only 1% preferred orphan. And I can tell you that the two individuals who constituted that 1% were both aged over 65. And this survey was done nearly 10 years ago, so who knows? You can see what I mean when I say that pronunciation is disappearing. Right, that's the end then. Thank you all very much.